news of the splendour and spending power that marked Kanka Musa's progress through Egypt and Syria soon reached the ears of merchants around the Mediterranean. Within 50 years of Musa's pilgrimage, the Majorcan cartographer Abraham Cresques had drawn a map for the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne, showing a black African monarch on a golden throne, and Timbuktu is the capital of Mali. The legend of a desert El Dorado had gripped European minds. Kanka Musa brought Arabic professors back from Mecca to boost Timbuktu's scholarship, though it's said they proved to be no match for the city's own black African scholars. He also commissioned new buildings to grace Timbuktu, including a palace. Any sign of Kanka Musa's palace, which it said once stood somewhere here, have long since disappeared. The palace was designed for the king by the Andalusian architect Es-Saheli, who Kanka Musa brought back from his pilgrimage to Mecca. When the palace fell into disuse, the site became an abattoir. But one magnificent remnant of Kanka Musa's legacy remains. The Djinguereber Mosque was also designed by Es-Saheli. It's been added to and repaired over 600 years, but it still represents a startling, almost futuristic vision, utterly different from my idea of a mosque. Impressive as it is now, back then Kanka Musa's mosque would have awed the people of Timbuktu, just as Europe's mighty cathedrals left their congregations in no doubt as to where the power lay. The imam guided me around the mosque's deceptively spacious interior.
We are in the second prayer aisle of the mosque, and there are 9 of them in all, each about 100 meters long. When you look from the outside, you get the impression that the mosque is not very large. But when you come inside, you see that it's actually huge. And when you come into the mosque too, you get the impression that it's air-conditioned. The architects made it in such a way to stop the heat from getting inside, because the mud brick is a bad conductor of heat. So the mosque always has the temperature of the early morning.
Scholarship as much as trade was to drive Timbuktu's reputation. Timbuktu's scholars were avid in their pursuit of knowledge in every field. Knowledge was highly respected in the Islamic world, and those possessing it won prestige and power. With its professors and their prolific writings, Timbuktu was set to become the region's most important centre of learning. Ibn Battuta, the great Moroccan world traveller who voyaged as far as China and ancient Mali, visited Timbuktu in the 14th century. In his chronicles, he noted his impressions of the city, in particular the piety, tolerance, wisdom and justice of its inhabitants.
You had so many books coming from Arabia, and because the people of Timbuktu had digested so much Islam, they were able to give it real meaning and accessibility for the people. Because of Timbuktu's mastery of Islam, it has always strived towards an Islam with great tolerance.
I wonder to what extent this tolerant Islam and its scholars' writings came from being filtered through African eyes.
In Africa, in Timbuktu or anywhere else, there was already a culture there. So when Islam arrived, it mixed with the culture already in place. And that's what made Islam what it is in Timbuktu today. So you have the tendency of having one foot in Islam and the other foot in an occult world of African roots. The manuscripts represent, as a whole, the tools for the transmission of Islam. In fact, they only show the domination of Islam.
The daily activity of Timbuktu's scholars revolved around its 3 mosques. The Sankore Mosque is said to have been built in the 14th century by a wealthy Tuareg woman. Together with two other mosques, the Sidi Yahia and the Jingareber, they comprised what became known as Sankore University. The Sankore's rise was marked by an expanding scholastic community whose intellectual musings rapidly filled the libraries. It also signalled Timbuktu's golden age, ushered in during the last decades of the 15th century by yet another turn in the cycle of West African empires. The Songhai Empire was the most powerful yet. Its creator, Soni Ali Bear, reigned from his capital Gao over a landmass greater than Western Europe. Nominally a Muslim, Soni was also a champion of African traditions. He refused to allow his culture to be subsumed by Islam. If Timbuktu's scholars weren't willing to play to his tune, he soon let them know who was boss.
The scholars and those in charge of the religious principles had to obey Soni. Otherwise, he would get rid of them. When he arrived in Timbuktu in January 1468, the scholars got scared and many fled to other towns and cities.
But Soni Ali Bear was also a visionary and an idealist, a leader who today's historians might hail as the continent's first Pan-Africanist.
Soni was a great visionary too. He wanted a united Africa, and furthermore, everywhere he conquered, he imposed his own language. For him, unity is the means of communication and a common language.
The emperors who succeeded Soni were more devoutly Muslim, encouraging Timbuktu scholarship and subsidizing its professors. By the mid-1500s, the city's size and population eclipsed that of many European capitals, and the Sankore University was recognized as West Africa's preeminent center of Islamic knowledge. But in Timbuktu, the term university doesn't quite equate to the modern concept of a university. Certainly Sankore was a major seat of learning, but it evolved its own particular scholarly structure. Timbuktu once had more than 180 Quranic schools, like this one, which taught the basics of Islam. Those who could afford to moved on to the Sankore University and undertook 3 further levels of study in Arabic grammar and literature, Islamic law and sciences, and commentaries on the Quran. Final exams were both oral and written, and degrees were presented to the successful candidates in the form of a special turban.
So here is the form of the turban, and this represents the diploma. What is the significance of this turban? This part is like this. Around the face, it's like this. Then there's the element that goes around the head, like this. And finally, you can see that all the parts of this turban make up the name of God. Once he has the turban, we take the student to the Sidi Yahia Mosque, where all the scholars are sitting down. The student sits in the middle. Suddenly, they rip the turban off his head. And the scholars tell him he doesn't deserve the turban. And then they ask him 7 questions about the Islamic law. If he answers the questions correctly, he can wear the turban once again. And everyone goes to the Sankore for a big party. Then the successful student enters the community of wise men and the imam.
The Sankore's professors and graduates weren't just the religious, but also the ruling elite. They were the lawmakers and the judges who governed every aspect of life. And though they lived among the people, they jealously guarded their power and kept the benefits of literacy to themselves.
In the case of Timbuktu,